We're talking right now all about how context is king and how to reach the right consumer in a more private world. I want to welcome our partner Taboola to this stage. And with them, we have three amazing guests to talk about this issue from all sides. So Josh Palau is Chief Media and Activation Officer at PhD. He's responsible for overseeing the go-to market approach of integrated media and activation solutions for PhD to deliver against clients' transformation and business goals. He also comes from the brand side. He previously was head of media for Bayer, where he built their in-house media and analytics team. Welcome, Josh. Next up, we also have Nadav Perry, VP of Global Brand and Agency Development at Taboola, a major native advertising platform on the open web. We're going to talk all about the open web. Nadav leads sales strategy and global development of relationships with both brands and agencies. Before joining Taboola, he spent 9 years at Google, actually, leading product strategy and innovation for YouTube across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Welcome, Nadav. And last but not least, Scott Spalding. He is VP of Global Agency Partnerships at MediaMath, one of the industry's leading DSPs. Scott collaborates with agency holding companies about their identity, data, tech, and supply strategies. And he has an extensive programmatic experience, having previously held leadership positions at both Quantcast and Rocket Fuel. So a lot of experience on this panel. Welcome to all three of you.
Thanks, Stephanie, for having us.
Thank you.
So I want to dive right in, and I'd love to get each of your take on this, but I'm going to start with Nadav. So a lot of conversation right now in the industry about the cookieless future. Do you see that as a threat or an opportunity for the open web?
Thanks, Stephanie, and hi again, Josh and Scott and everybody. Thanks for inviting us. Look, I don't know if it's a threat or an opportunity. For sure, but one thing's sure, it's not a surprise, right? And I think Dan from Google just talked about it. We've seen the progression for years. We've seen tech-savvy users apply ad blocks and use internet in a kind of privacy-safe way. We've seen regulators enforce GDPR and CCPA and other types of laws to protect consumers. And we've seen browsers already take action before Google. We've seen Safari and Edge and Firefox make three-party cookies not relevant. And so this is not a surprise. If it is, hitting anybody in the audience is surprised, then this is the time to kind of get prepared. Threats and opportunities, I think there's both. So, the pessimistic view would be to think about this as a cause and effect, right? We have cookies going away. That creates challenges for the effectiveness of advertising. That creates CPMs that are going down. That creates yield and profitability problems for the publishers, which creates a bad experience on the internet overall. That is a threat, especially if clients, publishers, and users are not prepared for it. But that's a pessimistic outlook, and I'm generally an optimistic guy. I think there's more opportunity than threat. And I would talk about four big opportunities. One, the internet is going to become more privacy-centric. Nobody likes to read the news about 500 million, personal information being stolen and hacked from a Facebook server, right? That's bad news. The internet becoming more private is a good direction. So that's the first good news. I think the second good news is that advertisers, and I think Dan just finished with that note, are going to become much more aware and capable of using their first-party data in multiple ways. We're already seeing the emergence of new omni-channel capabilities and CRM marketing capabilities, and that's exciting. The third, piece of good news is that new technologies are going to be developed. Necessity is the mother of innovation, and we're already seeing companies like the Trade Desk coming out with UID 2.0, initiatives like REAR coming out from IAB. So this is going to create a lot of new stuff. And the fourth piece of good news would be that existing technologies are going to be revisited, and we're going to talk about contextual, but if you add machine learning capabilities and artificial intelligence to already existing capabilities like contextual, you get an amazing result. And just to kind of add a nugget of data there, at Taboola, we've recently looked at our RPMs on Safari versus Chrome, and we learned that actually the RPMs on Safari has outgrown the RPMs on Chrome, which is a testament to the type of capabilities that we can drive using contextual plus deep machine learning and utilizing many signals. So I'll end on a positive note. I think there's more opportunity than threat, and I think we'll see a lot of innovation coming out of it. Stephanie.
Nadav, I appreciate that thorough answer, and I really hear in terms of a threat, it comes down to preparation and innovation around first-party data. Scott, I'd love to know your take: threat or opportunity?
I think we're approaching an extinction level event for a lot of mid-level ad tech companies where their primary revenue channel, it depends solely on third-party cookies to inform the decision-making on which consumer to influence. And then on the alternative side of targeting the measurement component where they're able to really justify their existence on media plans, the view-through conversion, how that's going to be tackled as well, I think it's going to be really challenging for mid-level ad tech companies. On the opportunistic side, I like that we're tearing the skyscraper down to the foundation and rebuilding the foundation, because over the last 25 years, I feel like we keep adding companies with point solutions all the way on top to just keep covering up an already cracked foundation. This allows us to really build the foundation much stronger and build a much higher skyscraper than we've really had in the past.
I like your characterization of it as, it's an existential moment, right? Josh, what is your take?
So I'll stick with or I'll end on a positive note. I do think, not that Scott's wasn't, the extinction level starts to get me nervous, though he might, I don't know that he's wrong, but I do think there's a couple of things to think about, but overall opportunity. I think one thing for everybody to continue to ground themselves in is, albeit still a decent percentage, this impacts about 20% of the ads on the web right now, more or less. And that's a stat that I read a couple of days ago. So there's still a lot out there that's being done that won't be impacted, specifically the whole world of connected TV, which we've seen just accelerate for, I don't know the last stat that said it accelerated like 5 years in the last 5 months. And so, those are areas where marketers we're having to build a solution to sort of address that audience. And so I think it's this great opportunity to sort of see how you can play in those spaces anyway, because they're growing. I also think that Google's announcement about not using an alternative, everybody else is going to start looking for an alternative. And so I think there's a chance for our industry, which I have been a part of for far longer than I will say, to sort of align and have some consistencies in terms of our approach. And then, I agree with Scott's comment that, there are some companies that are going to have to figure out, are we a business anymore? I do think there's companies that are going to find a way to say, hey, this is a new opportunity and a new technology player to come into the space that can actually live, or that could actually take advantage in a good way of what's happening right now.
Thank you. And I want to say to the audience too, these three are open to your questions. So if anything comes to mind as we're talking, please feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll save some time at the end. So, in addition to browser solutions, there are a number of emerging technologies. You guys mentioned innovation being really key here, that provide different ways to target. Scott, let's talk about those. I'd like to know your thoughts on which you think are most promising in helping people reach that right consumer.
Sure. I think contextual is going to need to accelerate with innovation. I think we have to look at this in two different buckets. I think we have to look at it through online video and display, where it could be a net positive or a net negative depending on how you look at supply economics. 30%-ish of a publishers and SSPs inventory has really been deemed not as valuable because you haven't been able to track with a third-party cookie. And so it's always gone to the priority of going to where you could measure those enabled cookied browser cookies. So I think we're going to see, the bottom of the economic come up a little bit more. So publishers may net out a little bit better than they have in the past to level the playing field. Then if you shift over to the other channels, such as digital out of home, CTV, and audio, I think we're going to see a bump in investment. I think we're going to see a bump in the innovation and the money fueling that innovation, just because we're going to have to get a lot better with our proxy measurement, right? If we're not able to measure all the way through, we're really going to have to refine that process to understand which channels are really making an impact across the media mix.
Nadav, what's your thought? Any innovations out there that have caught your eye?
I mean, I tend to agree with Scott. There's going to be a lot happening, and I have a different segmentation in mind. He talked about video and everything else. I kind of like to think about it as we're going to end up with an open web that is split to two. There's going to be the signed in open web, and there's already solutions that are emerging to help the open web become more signed in, and UID that I quoted before, or it's one of them. Some of the initiatives that are coming out of PRAM, to the Industry Partnership for Responsible and Addressable Media, are thinking about similar areas. That's one part of the web. But the brands need to grow through talking to new consumers, not only to talking to their existing consumers. And I think on the not signed in internet, contextual is going to become very, very important. I agree with Scott on that. And contextual is evolving, it's developing, it's turning from what used to be a very simple contextual solution, right? So a simple contextual solution might be, my target audience is young males. So I'm going to assume that young males like to read sports and video games, and I'm going to have contextually placed ads against sports and video games. That's simple contextual. That's the old generation. And I think what we're going to be seeing more is smart contextual, right? And smart contextual is about understanding in real time what the audience actually reads. And that could change within the day. That could change many, many times a day. And finding that target audience through contextual signals in real time to try to address those kind of moving pieces that are shaping what audiences are. And I think, we, at Taboola, since we're, have exclusive partnerships with many, over 10,000 publishers, we get a chance to have deep access to 56 billion monthly page views. That gives us a lot of information to work on. And we're already working very hard on modeling signals on top of the contextual articles. I think that's kind of the future of contextual. And I agree, for the open web, and especially the non-signed in open web, that's going to be one key solution.
One quick follow-up as people are trying to, I think, weed through providers, new and old. I've heard, a few people describe this time as like the Wild West, right? And there are a lot of, everyone's an identity provider. Do you have any recommendations for how to separate, the ones that are going to be valuable and moving you ahead and those that aren't? Anyone want to jump in on that?
I think, from sitting on first the brand side and now on the agency side, there's probably a few areas. I do think there is just some like basic due diligence that we're just all responsible to having to do. So whether it's looking at the technology they have or the leadership team, Scott shared an article the other day that was hysterical. It's like, who's not I am an identity provider, just so you guys know. Like every business has that in their thing. It's almost like back in I think, and again, I might be stealing Scott's joke, but there was, the ad network back in the day that like we're platform agnostic. And like, so it's digging at that surface of what they're offering and how that matches up to your needs. And I think, building off of sort of this conversation is like, when you really think about something like contextual, it's like a cross-publisher PMP. Right? Like think about it, that it's not your grandparents, contextual, where it was like, I am a running magazine. And the best part about this is how rooted it is in like old advertising, like print. Like I own a runner's magazine, I am going to advertise a runner's shoe. And, you find a partner that says, okay, well, I'm not targeting all runners. I don't want casual runners. I want marathon runners. And so I can cobble together these great sources of content that actually focus on those types of hardcore runners. And that's where your ad's going to go. And I think once you back that up by looking at either viewability or fraud or, oh my goodness, ROI, like you'll get to the answer pretty quickly as to what are the best partners to work with.
Josh, I think that's so helpful. Oh, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would just abridge that and say, as a CMO, you're not going to be as ready as you want to be at the event when it happens. And that's okay. I think it's okay to prepare it the best you can, have your identity readiness template, your framework, what it's supposed to look like. But there's a lot of value in the open web. Keep investing in the open web, because even though you're not going to get the scale on the first day after the event that you did before it, the alternative is you can give, especially if you're, in transportation categories, or if you're in commerce, you're giving, all of your investment to Google, which potentially could utilize that to become a competitor.
And I'll add to that. I mean, we're likely, whatever we do, we're likely to see, companies pop up like mushrooms after the rain, right? There's, if history shows us anything, is that we're going to have fragmentation before we have consolidation. And my one advice on top of everything that Josh and Scott said would be test partners that can prove results today. Don't wait for the change to hit us in the face. There's already so many options for us to test the current technologies and the current capabilities of your partners today on the different browsers that are already deprecated third parties, et cetera. So that would be my build on that.
It's all three of you. Thank you for the advice on that. And I hear that test today, prepare today. We have a lot of questions rolling in. I'm going to ask you one more and then let the audience have their say. So the cookieless train has left the station. How will you now decide how to invest clients' budgets? Let's talk about clients. How are you reassuring them that they won't lose out on performance?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things to think about here, and we're talking a lot about this event level thing that's going to absolutely create disruption. I'm not minimizing that. I think one thing that we to pay attention to also is you're always going to have some view, again, based on how your marketing mix is structured, on a bunch of advertising tactics, I'd say, that aren't going to be completely destroyed by this. And so your performance metrics are there and they exist. So I think it's starting with so as far as we know today, we have 8 months to figure some of this stuff out. So let's assume that Google hits its deadline and we're 8 months out and this changes. So you have a lot of time now, I think, to start with, how are my channels performing, right? Like, is social doing better in terms of a cost per acquisition, or is video doing better when it comes to new subscriber signups? Like, find those channels. And then I think it is incumbent upon you to do more testing around what platforms are going to be those alternatives to the post 8 month world. And let me see how those perform right now. Because the reality is we don't know at this point which are going to perform and which are not. And we also don't know, if you think about, the Apple update, like how many people are going to opt into that. And then that sort of changes a lot of what may have worked in the past. So I think for us, the advice starts with, let's look at where the people are, because we know that's not going to change dramatically, right? So what are the platforms that your target audience is consuming, and let's focus there. And then let's start to test ways that we can measure in this post sort of cookie world. And for us, we have a planning tool that was built out 3 years ago that was open source based on this principle of ID. And the identity, I think, as you're hearing from all of us, is going to be this key piece, which we all knew. And so for us, it's about starting with the fundamentals that have worked for years in marketing, and then of course optimize those, because the times have changed, which is what we've done. And I think that grounding point is where you start.
A question I want to throw to you all is from Casey Eakins, and it's about brands and agencies. So what are the types of questions a brand should be asking their agency in order to know how the agency will handle the changes to come?
Is that for me?
Anyone?
Yeah, I think that's for you, Josh.
Yeah.
You can start.
Yeah, I think first question, Casey, I would say, why can't you guys be like PhD? Start there. And by the way, it's so hard to do this with no laugh track behind me. So I'm running with this, and hopefully somebody in the audience is laughing. So I would say, look, ask their POV. There's tremendous talent, both agency and client side, that have been staring at this for a while. And so I think the starting point is, hey, what is your POV on what you're seeing from the space? And where are you guys in this conversation? So all kidding aside, just looking at Omnicom overall, we had built this platform well before I got here that focused in this identity world. And so some of what we're seeing, we feel that we're pretty strongly aligned to being able to perform against it, because this is here. And you might talk to another provider, another agency that's more I guess more entrenched in third-party cookie purchasing. And that's, they're gonna need to tell you what their plan is. And I think, but I feel like in so many things, it's more simple than we make it. And that's not an insult. That's an overall comment of just what do you see as, our path forward, given how we've been how we've been managing things for the past X amount of time.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that too, I think challenge your investment teams to give various scenarios of the economics modeling, thinking, if this certain scale that I'll have in this targeting channel versus this scale, what is the smartest amount of money I can spend in this channel to maximize before I hit the point of diminishing returns, then allocate to the next channel, then allocate to the next channel all the way down.
It's a great.
And one last build on that same question is test and see, everything that Josh said, what is the agency's POV, and also who are the agency's partners? I mean, Scott earlier said that the open web is maybe under an existential threat. Well, okay, who are going to be the big survivors, the big partners that are going to help carry the agency through this existential threat? And what are the technologies that the agency has in their toolbox to help clients go through this?
Nadav, I'm going to throw you this one from the audience. So it's about contextual. As contextual becomes a larger portion of future consideration for advertisers, does brand created content have a stronger role in attracting or influencing new customers and audiences? And this is from Michael Dyke-Miller.
Hey, Michael, thanks for the question. So actually, I'm really also kind of looking to hear Josh's and Scott's answers on this. But I'll say, look, when you mentioned I was back in YouTube, one of the things that I found hard when I was in YouTube is that despite my love to the platform, every time I went back home, my friends used to tell me, can you just stop those annoying ads, right? And I think part of the native environment is one that is creating a better experience. It's creating a better experience for users that are consuming content, that it's creating a better experience for ads because it delivers value for advertisers, and it's creating a better experience for publishers because they can really be proud of the experience that they're providing. And I think content marketing to that extent, Michael, is an amazing solution for brands, and it's working. And there's multiple ways to promote it and to get results from it, whether your results are more upper funnel kind of brand awareness, and that's what your content is serving, or whether it's bottom of the funnel lead generation. So I do think that within the context of the future of contextual marketing, content marketing is going to become more important, more prevalent, and I'm looking forward to see how that develops.
That's great. And I'm going to throw you one more question from the audience, and then I'd love to hear your takeaways. This is just about the future. So what do you envision the web of the future to be? What is it going to look like once all of these changes have been fully realized?
I think this is when we're supposed to talk about flying cars. Again, someone laugh. I think for my perspective, I think it's a future where it embraces some of the more traditional, I would say, ways that we advertised in the past. I mean, again, if we're being completely honest in these kinds of settings, I mean, we've had an industry that's been around for hundreds of years that for much of that time did demo-based TV buying, and many companies are quite successful, right? Like the J&Js and the P&Gs of the world did not build themselves through, single point of, right person, right message, right time marketing. And so I think we'll return to some of those fundamentals of where do we think people are and what do we think they're consuming? So, when the pandemic hit, like we spent a lot of time looking at a platform like Instacart, which we'd never advertised on before, but we didn't need a fancy like targeting approach or data-driven analysis to tell us that like this pandemic has hit and people don't want to go to stores. Where are they getting their products from? So let's make sure that they can get the message there. So I think it's going to put some marketers back in that role that they had of just like a mix of data, a mix of instinct, and pulling all those pieces together to come up with like the best plan. And I think for users, it's Jeff Green always talks about the quid pro quo of the internet. I think there becomes maybe they feel like there's a greater value exchange for the information they're giving and the content they're getting in return. But let's not discount the fact that at least I have a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old, and you know what? Like their acceptance of what the web gives them based on what little or what they give them or don't give them, is much different than how I view it. But I have money and they don't, so you probably want to cater to me at least for a little while.
Gosh, I appreciate that holistic sort of a picture of the future from all sides. We're almost out of time. I'd love to end on takeaways. Let us know what you'd like the audience to walk away with.
Oof. I'm going to nominate Nadav to go first.
I mean, I think a lot of the conversation today that I heard was, one, there's going to be threats and opportunities, but be prepared. You shouldn't be surprised. So that's one key takeaway. It's all about getting ready today based on current capabilities and embracing the new technologies that emerge. That's one. I mean, I'd say second is, start testing solutions that don't rely on third-party cookies. And again, the open web is probably going to be a bit more fragmented. There's going to be signed-in solutions and non-signed-in solutions. We're just going to have to experiment and ultimately, like Josh said, measure for results. That doesn't change. Advertisers are still going to be very much married to their KPIs and looking for the return on ad spend and continue to measure that. And that would be the second point. And then look out for contextual. It would be my third one, because that's going to be an area of development and improvement, whereby it will help advertisers get consumers that are interested in their product and services. And so those would be my three takeaways.
Yeah, I'll just go really quickly. I think we need to have patience as an industry, that where we want everything to be is going to take a couple years. Right after the deprecation event, there's needs to foster innovation to really build to where we need to get to the scale. And then second thing, I love that last question, and to bridge off of what Josh was saying, I think this crystal ball that we're looking for and where it's going to end up in 2 years, I think a reference point is going to be heavily weighted to CTV, just given how much momentum that's getting. We solve for X with CTV identity, and then we solve the larger view with all the other channels, how they come together and help drive CTV spend.
I mean, I would say you have time to plan and to figure this out. And I think that if you stick with, the grounded and even advanced fundamentals of what you're trying to do, I mean, your job as a marketer is to make a meaningful connection with a consumer and make your product top of mind to solving their problem, right? So just stick with that as your North Star, and the rest of the pieces will fall into place.
Scott, Josh, and Nadav, and our partner Taboola, I want to thank you all for this really wonderful conversation. I appreciate all the experience that you brought to the table, and I think the real concrete takeaways for our audience. So thank you so much.